Wanna do insane damage in big pulls, great damage in raids? Live out your Master of the Undead fantasy, sending your Scourge to raise hell while you spread plagues and bring the apocalypse. Talents, rotation, gear, and a lot more are here to get you started on your Unholy DK in 10.2. For talents, it's quite simple. There are two major builds you go for, one for single target and one for AoE. The single target build is pretty much the same as in 10.1, with the key talents defining the build being Commander of the Dead, having your Dark Transformation affect your Army of the Dead, Gargoyle, and Dark Arbiter, dealing 35% increased damage. Summon Gargoyle is yet another key talent you pick for a single target fight, calling the iconic beast to deal insane damage for 25 seconds as long as you keep buffing it with runic power spenders. It being on a 3-minute cooldown, it pairs perfectly with Army of the Dead, who's yet another defining talent to have in your single target build. This is also affected by yet another talent, Army of the Damned, which will reduce Army of the Dead's cooldown by 5 seconds whenever using Dead Coil or Epidemic, on top of getting Apocalypse cooldown to 45 seconds. Now, this being an easy to understand, quick to pick up guide will not get into all the details and class talents, as most of them will be addressed when talking about the opener and priorities. There's also the Defile raid build, but for the purpose of this guide, we'll keep it to this build only. You'll do great. You can copy the link from the description and import it in-game. Same goes for AoE, where you will go for the disease build. This primarily focuses on maintaining diseases on everybody and spamming epidemic. One key talent here is Defile, replacing Death and Decay and being the #1 reason you will die in dungeons because you cannot see shit. However, Defile will grow in size as long as the mobs are in it, and it will also increase your mastery for up to 8%. Not to mention that it will enable your Scourge Strike to cleave. Magus of the Dead and Apocalypse are also key talents for this build, as when you pop the latter, you will also spawn a Magus, throwing Frost and Shadow Bolts. The new tier set will further value your Magus, 2 sets spawning an additional 1 and having their Shadow Bolts hit 4 total targets, 4 set increasing the duration of the Magus by 0.5 seconds for each rune spent. The disease build is also in the description, just copy pasta. Again, you should be golden with this build, and there is a lot more to get into if you are interested on min-maxing and learning about each individual talent. So if you are into that, we have Biceps YouTube channel, Wowhead, and Icy Veins guides in the description, plus a link to the Acarus Discord. So how do we deal damage? Well, Unholy Dead Knights rely on kind of 3 resources to be managed properly. There are the runes, which generate passively based on your haste, and you consume these runes with abilities such as Festering Strike and Scourge Strike. Now, your goal is to use Festering Strike to apply Festering Wounds, this being another quasi-resource because you need to use Scourge Strike to pop these wounds in order to deal damage. Using Festering Strike and Scourge Strike will generate runic power, your third resource, and you consume this by using Dead Coil on bosses or Epidemic in AoE. Goes without saying, you should never overcap on any of these resources, and best practice would be to always sit at around 3-4 wounds and 80 runic power as an average, and also don't cap on your bank account with our Patreon. What? Patreon.com/MarcelianOnline. That's what. Hey, you can check the link in the description to see if you want to support this type of content and also get access to exclusive Patreon stuff like bloopers, Patreon podcasts, early access videos, not to mention the POG 4K wallpapers for your main. Look at them. I'm telling you, man, it's worth it. Patreon.com/MarcelianOnline is the place. Check it in the description. And hey, maybe become part of the MarcelianOnline family. Now, once you get comfy with the basic functionality of Unholy, let's talk about the opener and priority for Mythic Plus. As your tank goes towards a pack, move with him and place down Defile once you know he will stop somewhere. Next, hit a Scourge Strike on any of the mobs to begin the Plaguebringer buff. Plaguebringer will have your disease damage take 100% faster for 10 seconds. Pop Unholy Blight if available, if not, throw Outbreak to spread your diseases. Then hit Unholy Assault if available to generate 4 wounds, or hit 1 Festering Strike. This will make way for your next spell to press Apocalypse. After this, pop everything else. Dark Transformation, Abomination Limb, Empower Weapon, Trinket, Potion, etc. At this point, you will be full on runic powers, so start spamming Epidemic until you need to place Defile again, and always watch out for your Plaguebringer buff. If it's about to fall, hit a Scourge Strike again. If you're getting runic power starvation, hit more Scourge Strikes to get it back up in order to use more Epidemic. Strike. If you have no more Defile charges, you can start using Festering Strike to build some wounds as well, but in general, you kind of never need to press Festering Strike in dungeons, except for bosses obviously, or when you're out of Defiles. Now this applies to any pack that consists of 3+ targets. If you have to deal with 2 targets, then you start focusing on building wounds and bursting them with Scourge Strike on the priority one. You don't really use Epidemic on 2 targets, but this will be a very rare occurrence. After you've successfully performed your opener, you have to be aware of the priority, like what to press outside of the cooldowns. First, always be sure to use Unholy Blight or Outbreak to have 100% uptime on Virulent Plague. Second, hit Defile before its 4 seconds buff expires. Mastery is insanely important. Third, maintain your Plaguebringer buff 100% of the time by using Scourge Strike. Fourth, use Epidemic or Dead Coil on bosses so you never overcap on runic power. Lower in the priority is using Festering Strike. This only comes into play when you need wounds to pop Apocalypse. Now, once you step into the raid, the Talon build will bring you a different opener than the one in Mythic Plus. First thing, you will press Army of the Dead. Now, if you are still rocking the 4 set from 10.1, be sure to hit an Outbreak on the boss prior to popping Army. If not, just be sure to use Army 1-2 seconds before the pull. Then you Outbreak and hit 1 Festering Strike. After this, you place down Death and Decay, then you pop Dark Transformation and summon Gargoyle and a potion. Next, it's time to buff your Gargoyle, so hit 3 Dead Coils back to back. After this, hit Unholy Assault and your Trinket. If you're the PI target, this is when you ask for it. Next, use Empower Rune Weapon, and lastly, pop Apocalypse. After this is done, you enter into your Gargoyle priority rotation. Purpose being to buff the beast as much as possible. Spam Dead Coils as much as possible. Don't forget to place down Death and Decay again and stay in it for the 5% haste buff. Maintain Outbreak at all times. Use Clawing Shadows if you have 1 or more Festering Wounds. Use Festering Strike if you have no wounds on the target. After you're done with all your cooldowns and the Gargoyle priority, now you get to like the standard priority, which brings at the top of the list Soul Reaper, when the boss is at 35% health, with a very important note to not hit this button between Dark Transformation and Apocalypse because it will ruin your sequence. Second, as always, maintain your Virulent Plague with Outbreak. Third is no overcapping runic power, so spam that Dead Coil. Fourth, blast Festering Strikes if you are at 1 or no wounds. And lastly, hit Clawing Shadows when at 2 or more Festering Wounds. Alright, so once you are accustomed to the openers and priorities, you'll also need some good gear, right? Well, we'll cover here some of the top items you need for Unholy, but there is a full BIS list already done by the legend Bicepspump, and once again, it's all in the description if you want to know all about the item slots. One of the best trinkets for Unholy is Mirror of Fractured Tomorrows from Dawn of the Infinite Murzon's Rights dungeon. It will give you a huge chunk of secondary stats, and if you are loaded in Mastery, then you will love popping this trinket. Just be sure that you have Mastery as your highest stat by raw amount. Being on a 3-minute cooldown also pairs well with Army of the Dead and Gargoyle. Another BIS is Cataclysmic Signet Brand, this one dropping from Smolderon in the raid. It provides a healthy dose of strength and its passive damage. Quite good passive damage, with the catch that it also deals damage to you, so just be aware of it. One Giga Trinket for AoE is the Porcelain Crab from Throne of the Tides. It's basically a passive proc of Mastery generated by your auto attacks, and it is one of the best you can have if you plan to do a lot of dungeons. Other great trinkets to look out for are Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge from Urktos in the raid, Ashes of Embersol from Smolderon in the raid, Might of the Ocean from Throne of the Tides, or Razan's Gleaming Eye from Ataldazar. In terms of crafted gear, you will prioritize the embellishments first, so a vibrant Wintercloth Shawl with Shadow Flame Tempered Armor Patch is always a great first go. An allied Wrist Guard of Companionship for the versatility stacking, or alternatively for Mythic Plus, you can craft some Primal Molten Vambraces with blue silken lining. If you have a really low item level weapon, then you have to take into consideration crafting the weapon first. If not, make sure first to get your embellishments straight. Now let's talk about stats, and you know we cannot mention you needing to sim yourself to always get the proper info on your DK. But hey, if you cannot be bothered, the general stats look like this. In raids, item level is king, so strength is your numero uno focus. Second is mastery, lots of it, especially if you plan on using the mirror trinket. Then haste, And lastly, crit and versatility. For dungeons, same thing. Item level to boost your strength is top. Second, once again, mastery, then crit, then haste, and lastly, versatility. Do note that after getting your new tier set, all 4 pieces that is, haste will rocket in value and it will most likely go even above mastery. So be wary of that and always sim your gear. Taking note of these stat weights, or preferably after you simmed yourself, you need to start enchanting your gear. Goes without saying that Rune of the Fallen Crusader will always be on your weapon. Once available, be sure to get the incandescent essence for your headpiece, homebound speed for your cloak, cause any boost to your movement is very welcome, waken stats for the chest for a nice boost to your, well, stats, a shadow belt clasp for your belt as this will help with your tankiness, gaining a good chunk of stamina. Bracers will be enchanted with the devotion of speed, again for some extra movement. Legs will have the fierce armor kit for a bump in both DPS and survivability. Put Play Runner's Breeze on your boots because more speed. And lastly, Devotion of Mastery for the rings. You can also opt in for haste if you feel you are too slow because of the GCDs on the rings, I mean. Iced Vial of Corrupt and Rage will be the best vial to use regardless of content, with Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power for your potion of choice. For your weapon, always be stacked with Howling Runes for some more of that juicy haste. Always have one skillful Illimited Diamond in your gem slots and the rest should be Kin Neltherite. All for that mastery and haste. Now listen, there's a ton more stuff to get into when it comes to Unholy DK, and this guide barely scratching the surface, but it will get you going in the right direction. And once you feel you are ready, there are a lot of resources to tap into to further master the spec. The Acarus Discord is filled with awesome folks such as Taze and Bicepspump who are more than willing to help out and answer questions, and a huge thank you goes out to them for always helping the DK community and helping us with the guides too. Furthermore, as I mentioned in the beginning, the description contains both guides from Biceps and his YouTube channel. Make sure to check him out, plus the link to the Acarus Discord, so be sure to pay him a visit. And if you decided to play Unholy but you don't know what 10.2 is all about, check this video out to get the scoop on what to do and where to go in the new patch, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be a confused DK now, right?